Yes, I know, but it had to be done, really, didn't it? So here's the Apollo Detectives 2019, another Apollo fake moon landing video, and I don't know about you, but I think that when you see this, if you watch this video, Ben doesn't look his normal cheery self. He looks as though he's a little stressed, as though he has something on his mind. See, he's got his technical advisor here. I can't remember what he calls the alien now. Is it Ralph, the inflatable alien? And Ben's just going to give us a bit of an introduction to the video.
This is probably not going to be the last Apollo Detectives video, just to let you know, because
thank goodness for that. You couldn't write this stuff.
We are coming up to an important period in history, and I'd actually make this point in the main video, but I'll say it to you now. This is the 50th anniversary of the alleged first moon landing.
The alleged first moon landing. Yet it appears to be an important point in history. Okay. Well, history is based on fact usually, isn't it? Okay, well, let's proceed.
Which means the mainstream media are going to be kicking in everything they can in terms of propaganda. There's going to be a lot of documentaries about it, which are overtly just...
Well, it's not propaganda. It's a major historical event. This guy has absolutely no concept of the magnitude of the event he's talking about. And you know, to even suggest that this is faked, it never happened, is ludicrous.
It's informative about the historical event, but will perhaps have little subtle digs at you and me, and people who...
Oh, you can't be talking about me. There's nothing whatsoever subtle about my digs.
Question whether the Apollo moon mission is what it seems to be. You're also going to have probably outright debunking videos. That is...
I wonder who he could be thinking about here.
Debunking TV shows, mainstream media TV shows, with all the budget and resources that they have, basically attempting to discredit us. And indeed, that has already happened. There's many examples of TV shows which I've seen, which attempt unsuccessfully, I think, to...
And as usual, he's wrong. I think Mythbusters did a pretty good job. Can't think of anyone else that might have done it. But anyway, if there's anyone out there spending serious money on a documentary to show the moon landings were real, I suspect they easily succeeded, because the Apollo moon landings are fact.
Take down the arguments we make, the disputes we present to...
I think I've successfully taken down every one of your ridiculous arguments, and those ridiculous arguments made by the rest of your cronies, Ben. It looks like he's looking for a bit of divine guidance here.
The official story.
Looking at the ceiling.
Of the Apollo missions.
And again. I've never seen him do this before. Well, what do you think he has on his mind right now?
There's a lot of very high budget. There's a lot of very high budget TV productions involved in that. Not least a few rank amateurs like Steve Mumbling, who sort of back them up.
Actually, I've never really considered myself as backing them up. I suppose I am, of course. I'm just giving my own personal opinion. I'm not really backing anybody up. But what you've got to bear in mind here is that when it comes to this sort of thing, you know, with the technical aspects of the mission in particular, I wonder what made Ben think of rank amateurs. He's probably... I suspect there's a lot that none of them look like their normal selves in this video. They all look as though they're stressed. They have something on their mind, as though they know someone's going to be analysing every syllable. And if you think about Ben, of course, ex-hospital porter. I think he's a gardener now. So when it comes to commenting on the technical aspects of the Apollo mission, rank amateur. Rank amateur. In fact, I might even call this video the Apollo Defectives 3 Rank Amateurs on Patrol. Let's look at the rest of his team. You've got the chef, Scott Henderson, talking about the inverse square law. When it comes to commenting on the technical aspects of the mission, rank amateur. Rank amateur. And you've got Marcus Allen, the failed photographer, failed car salesman. Remember, he's booted out of Toyota. And I think these days he makes a living by standing on street corners, hawking copies of the Beano. So when it comes to commenting on technical aspects of the mission, rank amateur. Who else has he got there? Neil Peel, I think, is an artist, again. When it comes to commenting on the technical aspects of the Apollo mission, rank amateur. Bart Sibrel, filmmaker. Again, he might not be an amateur filmmaker, but when it comes to commenting on the technical aspects of the Apollo mission, a rank amateur, as I will clearly show in this video. Okay, let's just see what else he's got on the intro.
But it's not going to go away. These questions are not going to go away.
No, they probably won't, because there's always going to be someone around that has an IQ smaller than their shoe size that will look at these, will look at the pictures and they'll look at the technology, they'll understand none of it, and they'll say, oh, it's all faked, for reasons best known to themselves.
And the truth has to come out eventually.
Well, of course, the truth is out. It's all fact. It all happened. That's the truth. And the question is, why do people like Ben Emlyn-Jones and these other guys keep spruiking all this bloody rubbish? Especially people like Marcus Allen, whose Freudian slips clearly show he knows the moon landing's a historical fact.
And if we're going to get the truth out at all, then the way to do it is to ride the tides of anniversaries.
Ride the tides of fact that are crushing your ridiculous arguments. Never let the facts get in the way of a good conspiracy story, eh, Ben? All right, well, let's see what other pearls of wisdom we have from this team of experts. Okay, let's have a little look at the the remainder of the intro, where he's going to introduce the panel. Oh, by the way, what you're seeing there is all faked. That's not a real parachute.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for watching. This is Apollo Detectives Part 3. I am Ben Emlyn-Jones. I'm joined by my trusty hosts, Andrew Chaplin and Neil Geddes-Ward. And we have a new lineup of panel to talk about the Apollo moon missions this evening.
Stumbling over his words again. He's definitely got something on his mind, I think.
See, I think there's almost everyone who's ever done anything in this business, which means if we were all in the same buildings, if someone dropped a bomb, that would be it. The Apollo moon hoax would never be uncovered.
Now you're just teasing me, Ben. So if you got all of these guys and you had them in the same place at the same time, all in the same place, and someone dropped a bomb on it, that would be the end of the fake moon landing nonsense. Yes. You're definitely teasing me there, Ben.
But luckily we are in different parts of the world for contingency reasons.
They're in different parts of the world for contingency reasons. Yeah, okay. So that means that was a serious comment that he made before. He thinks that if they're all together in one place at the same time, someone will drop a bomb. Someone would drop a bomb on them, when in fact, the authorities and NASA and 99.99% of the population will just sit back and laugh at anything these guys have to say. And I've just noticed, actually, Marcus Allen's not looking too good, is he? I mean, if you take a look at Marcus Allen here, there's my pencil. There we go. Let's have a look at Marcus Allen. He's not looking very good at all, is he? He's not, you know, look at these bags under his eyes, looking a bit drawn. This is a stressed expression. It's almost as though, you know, he knows he's going to do this video, and he knows that someone is going to be analysing his every syllable. And he's probably got written on a card in front of him things he can talk about and things he can't talk about because he knows he'll get jumped on. Yes. Okay, we can jump on most of it, really, because anything Marcus Allen has to say is, of course, absolute rubbish. All right, well, let's continue.
Skype by the wonders of technology. I've got some names you'll recognise from the previous show, but also some new ones. So
it's probably a list of outpatients, I suspect.
And what I'll do is I'm going to ask these gentlemen to introduce themselves briefly. Let us start with, well, let's start with the guys you were on before. Marcus Allen, how are you?
Hello, Ben. Good evening. Good to be back on the Apollo Detectives. We get there in the end.
We certainly do, yeah. So what brings you to this juncture?
Well, 20 years ago, somebody showed me a photograph about the Apollo moon landings, and I thought, that looks a bit weird. I wonder how they got all that light into the scene. It was one of the Apollo 11 photographs.
Oh, wow.
I trained as a photographer. I'd studied photography. I knew the cameras. I knew the film.
And he still has zero photographic analytical ability. Because if you look at the who did that video, I'll probably try and find that video and put a link to it below, showing Changi 3 on the lunar surface with pretty much identical illumination to that of Apollo 11, showing the underside of the gold foil illuminated, plenty of sunlight coming off the surface of the moon, of course. So even when it comes to, he's obviously clueless with regard to the technical aspects of it. But he's also clueless with regard to the photographic aspects of it.
So I knew what I was looking at, and it just didn't
He thinks he knows what he's looking at.
make sense. And from then on, I just started looking further and more in detail at what was going on and all the stories put about by NASA. I couldn't get any straight answers from them, so I decided to do it myself.
Yeah, you can't get any straight answers from Marcus Allen either. I actually did a video called Marcus Allen, Never a Straight Answer. Maybe I'll leave a link to that below as well.
Oh, what I've been doing for the last 20 years is doing public presentations and asking people to prove me wrong. People have tried, they've made some very rude comments, but it's not usually to do with the science or the technology or the photography.
Yes it is, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that, you know, when it comes to the technical aspects of the mission, you're completely clueless, Mr. Allen. And I think I proved conclusively in the last video, when you said you couldn't get TV pictures from the moon because the lunar module didn't have enough power, I proved conclusively that you're wrong. When you said that ham radio operators only operate on long wave, I showed evidence to show that you were completely wrong. When you said it was ridiculous that a radio ham was listening to the Apollo transmissions, I showed the evidence to prove conclusively that you're wrong. And I left links to the information. I left the ham radio operator's call sign. He's still alive. You could have a chat with him. What else was there? There was, well, he's wrong about so many things, it's difficult to remember all of them, but certainly Marcus Allen has been proved wrong by me many times. Many times. He's completely wrong about the flag and the reflection of the flag in the lunar module window, and I showed that. He said it's doing a very good impression of an American flag. I don't see any stripes, I don't see any panel of stars. It's the wrong aspect ratio, and even Ben Emlyn-Jones says that the flagpole is in fact the graticule on the window of the lunar module. So you're wrong, Marcus Allen. If you want to come onto my channel, I'll happily discuss the science with you. You can tell us that you can show us exactly why getting television pictures from the lunar module would be impossible. You can show your path loss calculations, show your calculations with regard to how much power might be required, what band they might use, what frequencies they might use, and why. And while we're at it, we can get an answer from you as to why you might make a comment like, Von Braun and Co. were the Germans that got America to the moon. I reckon that would be quite a good one. So I'll tell you what, you've got Bob Branning's email address there, Mr. Allen. I think I've shown the email where you you don't give Bob a straight answer about whether or not you believe the Americans went to the moon. Flick Bob Branning an email. I'm sure Bob would be happy to let me know if you want to do a live interview on my channel. Okay, let's proceed.
Is to do with personalities, which of course is irrelevant.
Certainly in Mr. Allen's case, I don't see a personality, do you?
Should be, yeah, it should be. Well, thank you, Marcus. Now, we've also got another gentleman who was on the show before, all the way from sunny, was it freezing Canada, we have Scott Henderson. Hi, Scott.
Hello, Ben. Glad to be back on.
Oh, I forgot to mention that Marcus Allen is, of course, a rank amateur. And here's the other rank amateur, or another rank amateur, Scott Henderson, the chef, the souffle king, who would know all about the inverse square law and how it would prohibit high definition images getting from the moon to the Earth. Oh, this stuff is really, it's comedy gold. It really is.
Good to have you back on the show. So tell us about what you do, and it's got nothing to do with that newspaper headline behind you, is it?
Well, it started with that when I was in high school. It was I started in 1969, going into high school, and of course I've always been.
Yeah, I think we've heard all this sort of stuff before. I'll stop this clip here and move it on a bit. Okay, now he's got Bart Sabrell on here. Now, Bart Sabrell is going to say something a little later about people calling him names. Difficult not to, looking at him. The immediate impression I get that is if you looked up the word gormless in the dictionary, you would see this image. But, I just thought I'd pitch that in because he does make reference to people calling him names or calling people names or something like that, and I just thought, well, you know, that he comes out with so much rubbish that I'd have to let him get something right. Okay, let's just listen to this.
To the moon. That was a 5-year, $500,000 project where we bought.
Yeah, I've heard of this. I've never actually watched it. Perhaps I should.
Documentation from widows of deceased astronauts at $10,000 or $20,000 a pop.
Yeah, $10,000 to $20,000 a pop to get information from astronauts' widows. I think I better watch this video. I think I better watch it. I wonder if he produces any of this documentation. But if it says if it tells us the moon landings were faked, I'm afraid you've been conned, Mr. Sabrell.
Do research into the Apollo fraud. And then after I produced that film, originally it was for Fox Television, and we were going to make it just any length. It would have probably come out to be about an hour and a half, but they insisted we cut it down to 45 minutes. We had a great interview with Bill Casing and Ralph.
Yeah, Scott's not looking too happy either, is he? I mean, look at that expression. Yes, man. Corners of the mouth here in a downward direction. That's a fairly stressed appearance. He looks as though someone's going to pop up any minute and ask him to explain exactly why the inverse square law would prohibit getting high-definition images from the moon of the Apollo landing sites. We're getting pretty good high-definition images from Chang'e 3 from the lunar surface. That'd be an excellent question. You see, these guys never ever have anyone on here that can ask these sort of questions. It's just a conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist back-slapping fest. Every one of these guys makes a ridiculous comment or claim, and the others all cheer them on and slap them on the back. That's really not the way to do it, is it? Really not the way to do it.
Grenade that we had to cut out.
Well, unless you know you're talking absolute rubbish, of course.
And after a couple of years went by, I guess from watching TV court dramas as a kid, I thought, well, why don't we just track down some of these astronauts and see how many of them were swear on the Bible, whether they walked on the moon or not. And
Well, I don't quite know why they find that amusing, you know, swearing on the Bible. I mean, personally, I think that would be extremely offensive. You know, if I'd been an astronaut and I'd been a fighter pilot in the Korean War, a test pilot, and I'd been part of the Apollo program and I walked on the moon, and someone was thrusting a Bible under my nose saying, swear on the Bible that you did that, I would probably smack him in the mouth as well, to be perfectly honest. I think that's highly offensive. Don't quite know why these guys find that amusing. The other thing too is that it presupposes that these guys are Christians. They might not be remotely interested in the Bible. But yeah, can you imagine? Just put yourself in that position. You're an astronaut. You've been a fighter pilot in the Korean War. You know, you're a high achiever. You're not like these guys. And you've got someone shoving a Bible under your nose and saying, swear on the Bible you went to the moon. You'd say, get out of my face, you bloody idiot. I would anyway. So I don't quite know what they find so amusing about that.
And asked them, or told them we were doing a documentary about the moon landings, which is true. Obviously, if I said to prove that they're false, they wouldn't have granted an interview. And
I don't blame them. So he's actually got his interview, his audience with these guys under false pretenses, because he's not told them what the I can't call it a documentary really, can I? What his film is actually about. If he'd have told them that, he wouldn't have got an audience with them. So you can understand them being annoyed, kicking him in the backside, smacking him in the jaw. I think he was lucky, to be honest, that someone didn't kick him in the nuts and then knock him out, kick him under the chin. I think I might have been inclined to do that, especially if there wasn't any TV cameras around. But anyway, let's move on.
So that was their mistake for not investigating it further,
so it was their mistake for not investigating someone they'd never heard of, who said, can I have an interview with you? I want to talk about the moon landings. You know, they're going to think it's just like any other journalist. How many years after the event is this? They're not going to be interested in... they're not going to... It's not going to occur to them that it's going to be someone trying to debunk the moon landings, because the percentage of people that think it was faked is so small who'd be interested in that. It wouldn't even occur to them. If I was in that position, it wouldn't occur to me until I had this idiot standing in front of me waving a Bible around. This guy's a... Well, I'm going to prove him right again. This guy's just a moron.
Met with 8 of the Apollo astronauts, often in their homes, privately, on the record and off the record. And one person punched me, one person kicked me in the butt, one person threatened to punch me. And when we were kicked out of one person's
good on him. Love it.
House, an astronaut, we left a high-quality wireless microphone on him with the door closed. My inexperienced cameraman threw the camera in the back of the rental car, and it was still recording. And the person who did the transcript for us pointed out that they were discussing calling the CIA to have me assassinated.
Wow.
They really went to the moon.
Yeah, it's a shame they didn't. And he's still alive. So it's obviously one of those off-the-cuff remarks, isn't it? I mean, I might have said the same thing. Can we call the CIA and get this guy assassinated? Whack, get rid of this guy, get this guy out of the picture. Something like that. Because I would be seriously pissed off if this clown turned up on my doorstep and started waving a Bible around, asking me to swear on it that I walked on the moon. If I walked on the moon, yeah, I'd be seriously offended by that. Do we have this? Does he present this recording anywhere? Perhaps someone could leave a comment below. I'd like to listen to that. But he's telling us that he recorded that. So let's hear the recording of one of the astronauts saying, can we get the CIA to whack this guy again if the recording exists? Yeah, be an off-the-cuff remark. Okay, what else have we got?
And I'm some nut who thinks they didn't. Why would the CIA be involved in having an investigative journalist assassinated?
Well, yeah, exactly. You're still alive, aren't you? They don't give a damn about you because you're talking rubbish. Absolute rubbish. This guy, the CIA and NASA, and the American government, and 99.99% of the population think this guy is a clown.
That in and of itself proves that they didn't go. So,
well, no, it doesn't. No, if they didn't go and they wanted to hush that up, you'd be dead, you gormless twit.
well, that's been my main research and my main argument. I mean, all these great people you have on here, Marcus and Scott.
Great people.
And Jera, they have great, photographic analysis and rocket calculations. But
they have zero photographic analytical ability. They understand none of the technology.
To me, the argument is really simple. They're saying they went 1,000 times farther 50 years ago than they can go today.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, they're not. They can go to the moon today if they want to, but it's a case of spending the money and having the motivation to do it. It's very expensive to do that. It's very expensive to do space and go to the moon. No one's saying they can't do it.
Flew across the Atlantic in 1927, and 50 years later, no one on Earth can have an airplane that flies.
No, ridiculous comparison. No comparison whatsoever. Flying is commercially viable. People build planes to transport people to make money. It's all about making money. No one's going to be interested in going to the moon. I mean, not enough people would be interested in going to the moon to make it commercially viable. If you look at Ron Howard's movie Apollo 13, it clearly shows I'm assuming that the movie's reasonably historically accurate. It shows the general lack of interest the public have in the Apollo missions. After the initial moon landing, yay, fantastic. Apollo 13 was only the third moon mission, and people had lost interest in it already. And the actual movie depicts people watching, animal programs and all this when the live stream from the live TV stream from the Apollo 13 mission was supposed to be on TV. The networks canned it. People just weren't interested in it. So this is an extremely poor argument. Doesn't hold water at all. Unlike his cranium, I suspect. If you so when you look at Apollo 11, anyone in the street, ask them the first man on the moon, they'll all say Neil Armstrong. If you say who was the second man on the moon, probably half of them will say Buzz Aldrin, maybe more, because Buzz has got a bit more of a high profile. He does a lot of TV stuff. Ask them who the third man to walk on the moon was. No one will be able to tell you without looking it up. Or the fourth, and that's just Apollo 12, the next mission. That's how little interest there was in moon missions. Let alone Apollos 14, 15, 16 and 17. Who can name anyone from those missions without looking it up? No, I can't. I probably could actually, yeah, probably one, maybe two. That's how little public interest there was in going to the moon. Because going to the moon is so expensive, because it had been done, dusted, NASA got the T-shirt, they won the space race, it was new business, and they could do more valuable science with the space station, which is what they've done. There's going to be a new space race coming up because there's renewed interest in the moon, and this again is for commercial reasons. It's because of the helium-3 on the moon. People want to get up there and stake their claims. So, and when that happens, I think there'll be plenty of high definition images of the hardware left by the Apollo astronauts on the moon. Okay, let's move on.
That's across the Atlantic.
It's a joke, wasn't it?
Does it
Yeah.
go backwards, does it? That proves they didn't go right there without the flag blowing it
Of course it doesn't, you bloody idiot.
in the wind, without the shadows intersecting, without the rocket calculations. Logic proves that's an impossibility if they could go to the moon on the first attempt
Completely illogical argument.
with 1/1,000th the computing.
Actually, they got there on the first attempt. That in itself is giving the wrong impression. Apollo 8, of course, orbited the moon, went round the moon, and Apollo 10 also orbited the moon, detached the lunar module. The lunar module went down to within 8.5 miles of the lunar surface. In fact, they short-fueled it so that the guys on board wouldn't just go ahead and land and get the recognition as for being first. So to guarantee they wouldn't do that, they short-fueled the lunar module, so it didn't have enough fuel to land. But it got within 8.5 miles of the lunar surface. So that's a pretty good rehearsal, isn't it? You know, you've detached the spacecraft, you've got the guys in it, you've detached it, you've gone down to within 8.5 miles of the lunar surface. You're just about to start the landing profile. You can't get much closer than that without actually doing it. So they didn't. What he's saying here is giving completely the wrong impression.
Power of a cell phone. And then 50 years later, they should be in another solar system.
50 years later, you should be in another solar system. Well, that shows how ignorant this guy is with regard to technology required. You know, going to the moon is hard enough. You know, going to another solar system is orders of magnitude harder. Now, Ben probably thinks we do this as on a willy-nilly basis because he thinks we've got a secret space program. So I'm surprised Ben doesn't pipe up here and say, well, actually, we are in another solar system. We're in several. We're in several, but we've got a secret space program. More rubbish, of course. And we can't do interstellar travel. It's just the technology involved. The technology required for interstellar travel is just nothing like the technology we have. Ben might say, well, there was a design for a starship years ago, the Daedalus, which was basically a tin can that let atom bombs off in the back and propel it through space. But I mean, how long was it going to take to get there? It wasn't a realistic design, spacecraft design. If it was, they would have built it. And probably in another 500 years, we might be getting. I'll probably be 504 years. We say 500 years to get there. I haven't researched it, but it's going to be a long time. Or 40 years, 50 years, whatever it was, and then you got the other 4 years delay on the signal to if it's going to the nearest star to get back. So it's completely impractical. Yeah, that's why it wasn't done. So no, we shouldn't be in other solar systems. Again, showing his complete ignorance with regard the technology required.
It should have been on Mars 10 years after the moon landing 40 years ago.
Well, that's what we were.
There should be pieces.
And again, you know, Mars 10 years after the moon landing 40 years ago. That's 50 years ago, wasn't it? So, can't even get that right. Mars is very hard to do. There are problems with landing on Mars. Again, he doesn't understand the technology. You know, landing on Mars is not like landing on the moon. Very difficult to land a vehicle on Mars. I think the heaviest vehicle they've managed to land on Mars successfully is about a ton, isn't it? Might be a little bit more, but you'd need a much bigger spacecraft if it had people in it. And you have problems with the Martian atmosphere because Mars has an atmosphere. It's thick enough that it's thick enough to cause heating and what have you, but it's not thick enough to work terribly well with parachutes. So you've still got to use retro rockets and parachutes, and it's a very hard thing to do to land on Mars. So these guys have got, or this guy in particular, has absolutely no idea of the technology required to land on Mars. You know, you can't just get something like Curiosity, scale it up by a factor of 10 and put people in it. It's not going to work. Very, very hard to do. And again, you know, the motivation wasn't there. What's the point? If you can send a robot there to collect samples and analyse samples, why send people there? Why go to all that extra expense? And you'd be talking, goodness knows how many times more expensive it would be to try and send people to Mars. Even today, you know, that it's going to require an awful lot of good engineering to successfully get people to Mars and back again. So 10 years after the lunar landing, he's got no concept of the challenges with Mars. You know, he thinks, oh well, you can go to the moon, go to Mars. You know, easy. He's completely clueless, absolutely clueless.
It's all over the moon like there are at the South Pole. I mean, the South Pole has 100-mile-per-hour winds, minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and there are...
Yeah, and you can take stuff there on ships. You know, it's... There's no comparison to be drawn between a base in Antarctica and a base on the moon. Very easy to get people to Antarctica and back, and supplies, and you know, you can fly there, you can go, you can take all sorts of stuff in ships, and there's no problem at all. You've got a couple of windows when you can do it because of you know, you can't do it in the winter, but no comparison between that and the moon or Mars. You know, the costs would be just unimaginably higher to do space than it is to go to the pole. Either of the poles, and set up something.
There are bases there because it's humanly possible. If it were humanly possible to go to the moon, there would be bases there. It's so simple.
No, absolute rubbish. If it was humanly possible to go to the moon, there would be bases there. That's his opinion, and he's wrong. There's got to be a good reason for having a base on the moon. Yeah, very, very expensive to do. You've got to supply it. You've got to change the crews. Very, 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 very expensive to do. You've got to have a very good motivation for doing it. And it's only recently, that in recent years, that motivation has appeared, and they're seriously talking about doing it. But up until that point, no one's interested in moon bases. No one's interested in spending money on moon bases. What will be the point? They've been to the moon, they've collected the rocks, they've collected the dust, they know what it's made of. They fired rockets into it to see what sort of sound it makes, so they can tell how dense it is, you know, and all this sort of stuff. Why would they need to have a base on the moon? Makes no sense whatsoever.
There are no bases there, which means they can't go. It's so simple.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're so simple, Mr. Sabrell. You're completely wrong, absolutely clueless.
Exactly, you'd think that's what it said in science fiction. That's absolutely true. But finally, this evening, we're going all the way to definitely very, very sunny Australia, from what I've heard. And we have the only man in the world who is licensed to kill moon hoaxes. It is Jarrah White. Hi, Jarrah.
He's licensed to kill moon hoaxers. Really? He should be killing you lot then, shouldn't he?
Hello,
Jarrah.
nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. This is Jarrah's not been on before,
Yes.
but he's a very, very interesting chap. So tell us about your research, because you were sort of YouTube, and then your channel's very good. So how did that come about?
Well, back during my childhood, I was a huge fan of NASA, astronomy, space exploration.
Okay, I think he waffles on a bit here, so I'm just going to move this on to the funny bits. Yeah, I should have actually let this run on, because he says here something that I wanted to comment on directly.
With the rest of the screen, you know, black like the Earth floating in space. And apparently this is supposed to be the camera lens at the window of the glass shooting the tiny Earth far away, as if they're halfway to the moon. In fact, the part that they aired, it says Neil Armstrong calling in from 130,000 miles out, right? So
That's supposed to be a very important piece of footage.
Well, it's one of the special effects shots that the astronaut...
It's supposed to be shot inside the spacecraft, which is 130,000 miles out. Okay, did you get that?
themselves photographed. So the camera was really at the back of the spacecraft. The circular window has, you know, part of the Earth outside of it, and they either are sectioning off the Earth, or have a transparency that, you know, to mimic the Earth, and basically...
Either that or the camera's shooting out the window at the Earth.
You see in real time, unedited, them faking being halfway to the moon, right in front of your eyes. And then there's a third party.
Again, no, you don't. I've actually seen that. And that is his complete failure to understand what he's looking at.
Of audio of the CIA that they accidentally let be recorded. And so you hear NASA say the TV picture looks great, and then exactly 4 seconds go by, you hear this third party say, talk, and then Neil Armstrong speaks. So originally I thought, well, he's not paying attention. They're saying, hey, pay attention here. But in fact, they wanted him to wait 4 seconds to give the impression that he's further away from the Earth than he really was. He was really about 250 miles up, and he could respond.
Yeah, okay. So he's saying that the spacecraft is 130,000 miles out. He then says that you can hear someone from the CIA saying, talk, and they're simulating the 4-second delay because it will take 2 seconds for the signal to get from the Earth to the spacecraft and back to the Earth again. And now Marcus Allen, I think, has commented before about the delay, and he was actually right. So Marcus Allen knows he's talking rubbish here, but he's not picked him up on it. So if the spacecraft is 130,000 miles from the Earth, the round-trip delay time for the radio signal would be just a fraction under 1.4 seconds, not 4 seconds. So this guy is so bloody clueless. He's even unaware that he's got something as simple as that wrong. The other thing to mention here is that he says there's a voice on there saying talk. Now, it may be that a CIA voice saying talk. Where is his evidence? If this is actually on the recording at all, and it could be, what is his evidence that that voice is from someone is someone from the CIA? What evidence does he have for that? This is just more bullshit. This is just more off the top of his head rubbish. He'll stand in a pub and tell this story and people will lap it up. It's got to be someone from the CIA that's talking to the spacecraft. Can you see how ridiculous that is? You know. And something that these guys do not understand. You know, when you hear the beeps, if you listen to a recording of the communications from Capcom to Apollo and back, there's the go ahead with your message, Neil. And they're slightly different. You don't notice it because they're very, very close in frequency. One of David Icke's favourite words. But that is called in-band tone signalling, and that's controlling who transmits and who receives when they do that. So is Capcom transmitting. He says his piece, then Apollo transmits back. And it may be that, you know, he released the PTT, didn't hear a tone, didn't hear the in-band tone, so he just said talk, you know, if that is on there at all. So time delay, completely wrong. Spacecraft's 130,000 miles from Earth. If they were going to simulate it, you would think that those clever chaps at NASA would get the time delay right, just a hair under 1.4 seconds, not 4 seconds. Again, this guy is talking out of his more than ample backside. Okay, that's the first thing. So we got the time delay and the evidence that the voice, first of all, was on there, and secondly, that it was from someone from the CIA. All rubbish. Okay, I haven't seen I haven't seen any of that. I haven't seen any of that evidence. Have you? All right, let's see what else he's got to say.
Directly like you and I are, but there was supposed to be an increased radio delay, so they counted off 2 seconds for the radio signal to reach the astronauts if they were halfway to the moon.
Completely wrong, of course, as I've just indicated. If you want to check that for yourself, radio waves travel at 186,000 miles per second, so 130,000 miles from the Earth. It's going to take less than a second to get to the spacecraft, isn't it? So round trip, 260,000 miles. Divide that by 186,000, you get 1.39, something like that. This guy isn't even smart enough to do that simple calculation.
2 seconds for it to come back, And then they said talk to make sure that he didn't speak until 4 seconds go by to create this fake time delay as if he were really halfway to the moon. The lights come up, you see the real position of the camera, you can see all this, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. And, you know, three and a half years into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon. I call up Bill, and he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And I'm like, yeah, but...
Yeah, absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. I'm just going to stop this here and get on to the other point that I wanted to make with regard to this particular character, Mr. Potato Head here. Okay, this was another point I wanted to make.
Here on Earth, Mount Everest, right, and the South Pole, that took numerous tries for them to go. In fact, in the entire history of aviation, there's never been a flying machine that worked on its first occasion. The 747 was built with 10 years newer technology than the Apollo rocket, and it took 162 attempts to get that fuselage off the ground.
Absolute rubbish. The 747 flew on its first test flight. In fact, I'll show you a clip of the 747's first test flight. So, absolute drivel. I think the Concorde flew on its first test flight as well, didn't it? Now, it might have taken something like 1,000 test flights to get it FAA approved, because there was a few tweaks. They had a bit of wing wobble on it and some other bits and pieces, but it certainly did not make they did not make hundreds of attempts to get that fuselage in the air. This guy is talking absolute bloody rubbish. The 747 flew on its first test flight. And 10 years, technology 10 years newer than Apollo. The first test flight of the Boeing 747 was in February 1969. That's a couple of months earlier than a few months earlier than the moon landing. So again, more rubbish. More absolute drivel from Bart Sibrel. Absolute bloody rubbish. Okay, let's have a look at the 747's first test flight. Okay, so let's have a look at this. What was it? 162 attempts to get the 747 fuselage off the ground. Here is the first test flight of the Boeing 747. I'll leave a link to this video below. 9th of February 1969. So it's hardly 10 years. Hardly 10 years after Apollo, is it? The first test flight of the Boeing 747 jumbo jet. So let's see how. Let's see how awkwardly it struggles into the air.
To February 1969, piloted by Jack Waddell, with co-pilot Brian Wiggle and flight engineer Jess Wallach. The plane, named the City of Everett, left the Payne Field Airport near Everett in Washington State, about 30 miles north of Seattle.
Yeah, it's really struggling there. It looks terribly unstable, doesn't it?
And performed a number of tests before landing again at 12:50 in the afternoon. Over 1,000...
Oh, I didn't catch the time it took off, but so that was in the air for hours, was it? So it's hardly taken 162 attempts to get that fuselage in the air, has it? That's absolute bloody rubbish from Bart Sibrel.
1,000 more test flights were conducted before the plane was finally certified by the Federal Aviation Authority on
the
30th of December that year.
Yeah, okay. So on the 30th of December that year, it got its certification after 1,000 more test flights. But that's not bad. I mean, that's still only 11 months after the first test flight, and quite clearly we can see it flew, and it flew very well. Obviously, it needed a few tweaks. Very complicated machine, very large aircraft. It was engineered very quickly. but it needed some tweaks to get the FAA certification. I think one of those tweaks was they had a bit of wing wobble on it. There's a very interesting documentary, and I might see if I can find that and leave a link to that below as well, about the development of the 747. Very interesting stuff. Certainly flew perfectly well on its first test flight, which was just a few months before the first moon landing, 9th of February 1969. So don't know where he gets his 10 years from. I've got no idea where he gets his 162 attempts to get the thing in the air from. Absolute bloody rubbish. The sort of rubbish that you hear commonly from these conspiracy people. They get so used to spruiking their absolute bloody rubbish and being slapped on the back, you know, and people going, oh yeah, okay, because they're normally surrounded by conspiracy people that lap this bloody rubbish up. They're not normally standing in front of someone that is capable of critical thought, you know, that will actually check what's going on. They can actually look at something like this and think, yeah, this is real. You know, this is the first test flight of the 747. What a beautiful looking aircraft, how gracefully it climbs into the sky. Yeah, okay, and just to prove a point, I'll just see if I can find a couple more videos of aircraft flying perfectly well on their first test flight. Right, so Mr. Sabrell says never in the history of aviation has any aircraft flown on its first test flight. Never flown before it's... never got off the ground at the first attempt. Okay, well, let's have a look at the first flight of the Concorde.
Toulouse. Concorde 001 made her most important public appearance back end first. She was being nosed out of her hangar by a tractor on the day for which Britain and France and the rest of the world had waited so long.
And that day was in 1969, obviously a very big year for great feats of engineering and human endeavour.
The great, giant, supersonic jetliner was going to fly. A year late, millions of pounds over the estimated cost, and still a very big question mark. These were Concorde's first claims to fame. But on this day, a lot of those question marks would be answered.
Will it fly?
Concorde 001, this was the chance to prove she was the superbird everyone had hoped and worked for.
And she certainly was.
193 feet long, 38 feet tall, with a wingspan of 84 feet. Vital statistics of an Anglo-French lady who was all dressed up and ready to go places on the biggest date of her life. Keeping that date were the world's press. All eyes were glued to the sleek, futuristic machine standing on its spindly legs out there. Its droop snoot in the down position surveying the scene. At the other end, heat surged from the mighty Rolls-Royce engines as the ground crew checked, rechecked and checked again. Concorde...
Yeah, Rolls-Royce Olympus engines, the same power plant that was putting the British V-bombers of the day.
Was buttoned up good and tight. There was little more anyone could do other than fly her. After 6 years of designing and building, delays and progress...
6 years, that's amazing.
The dream was a reality. Concorde nosed slowly out towards the starting point of her flying career. The men chosen to crew the Speedbird on her maiden flight had plenty to do during the last few seconds before takeoff. The all-important final pre-flight check, carried out by Chief Pilot André Tocca and his crew, went without a hitch. This was it.
Beautiful, look at that. Another example of the sort of rubbish you hear from Bart Sabrell. First ever flight of Concorde. Look how beautifully it flies. Never in the history of aviation has any aircraft flown first attempt. Absolute bloody drivel.
With 12 tons of test equipment on board, Andre Turca took Concorde up to 10,000 feet. She was almost ticking over at less than 300 miles an hour.
Well, I think there's enough of that. I think that clearly shows that Concorde flew perfectly well. That's the first time Concorde had ever taken to the air. And yeah, another example of the sort of rubbish you hear from these conspiracy idiots. I'll see if I can find another one. And here's yet another one. This is Boeing 777, the first flight of a Boeing 777, June the 12th, 1994. And I think you'll find that, contrary to what you might hear from these people like Bart Sabrell, never in the history of aviation has anything flown the first time. Almost every single, I think, in fact, every single aircraft, commercial aircraft, has flown on its first test flight. I don't think any of them have ever not flown well on their first test flight. So anyway, let's just see this one.
Boeing 777 heavy paint, tower 94 left clear for takeoff, wind 15010.
Well, look at that. It's an absolute disaster, isn't it? Are they clouds beneath it? They can't be, because that would mean it would have to be flying.
I'd say my expectations were more than met. I did not expect the airplane to go quite as well. I mean, you always are hopeful that it would. And I felt this airplane as a brand new model really did exceptionally well.
Yeah, well, I think that's enough of that. You get the gist of that. So every commercial aircraft ever built has flown perfectly well on its first test flight. So put a line through Bart Sabrell and any of his bloody rubbish. Okay, let's see what else we can find. Okay, now we're just going to stay with Mr. Sabrell. I'm going to do this video in two parts. This is going to be Apollo Defectives Part 1. I've given the game away there with regard to the name of the video, but this is going to be a Part 1. I've only watched about half of this video. I do have other things to do this weekend, and you know, apologies for any repetition, because I do these clips at different times. There might be hours between them, and join them up with very little editing. So I'll apologise in advance for any repetition. But I've only watched about the first half of it, maybe not quite the first half. So this will be, the first half will be Part 1, and I'll do a second one as Part 2. And I think in Part 2 we'll be having a look at the new Colin. And they've got a new Colin here, someone called Jarrah White. And we'll be having a bit of a giggle at his. He's showing some calculations there and talking about the Van Allen belts. And a little bit of Googling shows that their new Colin likes to regurgitate other people's calculations. And even though they're incorrect, he continues to he put the calculations forward because he doesn't understand them. So we'll be having a look at that. I had a very quick look at it, and it would appear that his calculations relate to an astronaut that is stark naked travelling through the most intense part of the radiation, the Van Allen radiation belts in their entirety. So he's stark naked, completely without the protection of a spacesuit or a spacecraft. So I think we'll have a bit of a giggle with their new Colin in part 2. Okay, but for now, let's stick with this mental giant, Mr. Sabrell here. And let's just see what he's got to say here.
Challenge people on 2 things. You know, I've got that one photograph, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon where the astronaut shadow is at 12 o'clock, and a rock about 5 feet away is at 9 o'clock. And I say, videotape going outside in sunlight, 2 objects in that position and going 90-degree shadows. And if you can do that in sunlight, I'll say we didn't go to the moon. And
I think you mean you'll say that we did go to the moon. You see what these guys, all of their subconscious, it's all, everything in there is fake. You know, it's got to be a con. It's got to be a fake. You know, he can't even he can't even say, if you can do that, I'll admit we did go to the moon, which is what he means, of course. So that's just another indication of how these sort of people think. That's all they think. It's it's a conspiracy. There's something going on there. Just that Freudian slip shows us what's going on inside that glistening dome. So, okay, well, let's go to a clip from a video that I did called Moon Shadow, and we'll have a look at some intersecting shadows. And I'll look forward to Mr. Sabrell doing a video saying that he's happy to accept that we did go to the moon, exactly as the history books tell us. Right, now here's a video that I did. It's actually called Moon Shadow, because there have been a few people talking about these moon shadows. You know, how the shadows should be parallel if there's only one light source. Sort of gibberish you hear from Mr. Sabrell. Now, there's one light source here. It's the sun in the sky. Now you can see that this shadow is moving like that. This shadow is moving like that. They're splaying away from each other, the shadows. This one is splaying away again. And the shadow from that bar there is intersecting this shadow here. Similarly, this shadow here from this bar is intersecting this shadow here. It all depends on, you know, the angle of the object, you know, the angle of the light. It's going to cast shadows in different directions, quite clearly shown. What do we know about the lunar surface? Well, we know it's not flat. So he's got a guy and a rock, you know, and if the so if that's the guy and that's the rock, if the rock's at a bit of an angle, you're going to get the shadow going towards the astronaut, aren't you? So there are 2 intersecting shadows. All depends on what it's a shadow of, what angle the thing is at, the object is that's casting the shadow. And again, you know, these lines are not parallel. Big radio mast here. One light source, the sun up in the sky. That's splaying away there. That's splaying away there. That's intersecting that shadow there. So I'll be looking forward to your video telling everybody that you were wrong, Mr. Sabrell, and that you're happy to accept that the moon landings are historical fact. Okay, next. Yes, and if anyone knows the actual image that Mr. Sabrell is talking about, the astronaut and the rock, perhaps you could show that image, Ben. We'll leave a link to it below, or if anyone else can, then the next time I'm out in the bush, I spend a lot of time out in the bush, I will recreate that exactly. There's plenty of rocks out in the bush, so I'll be able to recreate that image exactly. I can say that with confidence because I know that if it's a real Apollo image, it will be a real image. It's not going to be fake, there's not going to be more light sources. So, leave a link to the image that Mr. Sabrill is talking about with the astronaut and the rock. And if he's not happy with my intersecting shadows in the video that I just showed previously with the fence and the radio mast, then I'll recreate the scene precisely. Happy to do that. Out in the bush next time I'm out there. I'm out there almost every week. So, right, moving on.
By von Braun himself, that says to go to the moon in one rocket is impossible. It'll take 3 rockets, each weighing 800,000 tons. First, you have to go and build the space station, and then from there, ferry the fuel. Of course, the space station wasn't even officially finished until a few years ago. And then Richard Nixon said the #1 enemy of America during this time was the domestic protests against the Vietnam War. And then we have Bill Casey. Now, the reason why Bill Casey is so unique is as he was basically a technical writer.
Yeah, I'll have to look at this Bill Casey. But what he's talking about, Von Braun saying you'll need 3 rockets and all this sort of stuff, that had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with putting 3 guys in a tin can and sending them to the moon. What that had to do with was a proposal to send 50 scientists to the moon for something like 6 months, for them to have a caterpillar-tracked vehicle to roam around in while they were there, and then return them back to the Earth. So this is, again, typical of the sort of rubbish you hear from these conspiracy clowns, completely out of context, nothing whatsoever to do with the Apollo mission. Okay, I'll just see if I can find a bit of info about what Von Braun actually had to say about this 3-rocket mission to the moon. Okay, so this is from Debunked. Can't say I've heard of Debunked before, but I'm happier to accept something I might see on here than anything I might see on Ben Jones's channel. So the objective of the project described is the exploration of a limited section of the moon's surface. The personnel of the expedition consists of 50 highly specialised and selected scientists and engineers who make the trip to the moon, land there, spend a total of 6 weeks on the desolate, airless face of the moon. 6 weeks, not 6 months, sorry. So I'm staying corrected there. And return to the home planet. The project requires a space station, 3 moonships. I think I read somewhere else they needed a caterpillar-tracked vehicle to transport them around as well. So that's where the Von Braun 3 huge moonships comes from, and you'll need a space station to build it. Nothing whatsoever to do with the Apollo mission. Sending 50 scientists there, sustaining them for 6 weeks with a caterpillar-tracked vehicle to roam around and bring them all back to the Earth, pales. Sending 3 guys in a tin can pales into insignificance compared with that. And I think that was just a sort of theoretical thing he was kicking around. So, again, you know, Sabrill has seen this somewhere. I think this is spruiked by conspiracy theorists. And he's run with it, of course. And it's got nothing whatsoever, completely and utterly out of context with regard the Apollo missions. Okay, well, I'm getting a little bit tired. I think I'm going to end part 1 there. So I'm going to end part 1. And when I don't know whether it's going to be this weekend. I might be able to get around to it this weekend. I'll have a look at the other half of this latest effort, and I'll do another video with comments regarding the second half of it, and I'll call that, whatever I call this, part 2. If you've struggled all the way through the video as usual to this point, many thanks for your perseverance. Thanks for watching, and perhaps I'll catch you again.